Dag, dames en heren. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And a special welcome to all my cartophile friends. I see familiar faces here. I feel happy and honored to be here on this moment. Happy because Amsterdam is going to have a new map fair, and honored because I'm going to speak on its first opening day. Choosing a subject for a topic is not always easy. But on this occasion, in the Scheepvaartmuseum in Amsterdam, a place that is steeped in nautical history, both the Dutch East India Company and the Holland Admiralty, the Holland Navy, have been at home here for a couple of hundred years. So actually, the choice came easy. The question, is it a sea chart? Is it a sea chart? Is maybe a good question, but not always easy to determine. But we'll have a look at what is necessary to qualify as a sea chart. What will make a map into a chart. My personal definition is guiding you today for what it's worth. My personal definition is any map that is used, has been used, will be used, could be used for navigating a ship from its point of departure to its docking or anchoring at destination. That will be a chart, and that will not be a map. With your permission, I will now relocate to that chair there, so I can see my slides and comment on what we are both seeing. Is this a sea chart? There is a lot of sea on it. The title is Maris Pacifici, which seems to suggest it is a sea chart. There's also a lot of land on it. There is a ship on it. The ship is the Victoria of Magellan. There is a complimentary note below the ship, but regrettably, this is not a sea chart. You can also see that the meridians are curved lines and not straight lines. That wouldn't be suitable for navigation. It would be easy, of course, if the sea charts would tell themselves whether they are sea charts or not. Here I'm showing you the title page of the Klaarlichtende Noordstar Sea Atlas from Van Loon, and on the right you see the detail of the upper part. You see the ships, you see the sea, and you see a lot of stars, and among them is the polar star, the North Star, the brightly shining North Star. That will tell you that this atlas is containing sea charts. I have another one, that is the title page on the right of the Sea Atlas by Peter Goos of 1666. It says it is a sea atlas, a zeeatlas, the waterwereld, the water world, sea coasts, and it is of interest to traders, shippers, skippers, and navigators. Then this one. This is the title page of the Germania Inferior, 1617, the Latin edition, the French edition is 1622. And you see on the left, the top part of the title page. On the left, the very left, you see a gentleman with a book, and he is praising the invention of the press, the book printing process. Then you see the lady with the ship. The lady has some celestial sphere. And on the right you see a gentleman with a compass and the leaden line to make depth soundings. So that sounds pretty much like a sea chart. But is it a sea chart? No, regrettably. It is a topographical atlas of the 17 provinces, not a sea chart. This one is getting somewhere into the direction of sea charts. It shows you Flavius Amalfitano from Amalfi, south of Naples. The print is by Jan van Straten or Stradanus in Latin. It's published by Galle in Antwerp. And you see that the gentleman here has a ship at the ceiling. He has a globe. He's working on something like a compass, has a book. You see that he is either sleeping in his office or working in his bedroom. But on the very lower left, you see the interesting thing. That is a vessel filled with water. There is a wooden plank, and on it is a magnetite stone, which will allow to indicate magnetic north. This is the beginning of the compass as it was invented in the Western world. This also has to do with compass. It is from the Jansonius Atlas, Sea Atlas of 1655, and it looks like a wind rose or a compass rose, but actually these things are not the same, so I have called it a hybrid compass rose, because in one of the 6 languages the directions are indicated according to the system of the Mediterranean Sea, where you have Sirocco's, Grecale, the winds coming from Greece, the Libecchio, the wind coming from Libya, the Maastrale, the northwesterly wind. But on the other rings you will see that is referring to the compass points, the compass degrees, north, south, east, and anything in between. The reason being, of course, that outside of the Mediterranean winds do not really help you in navigation. This is a portolan from the National Archives in The Hague. It is by Russo from Messina on Sicily. And this is one of the oldest one. It is printed on vellum, an animal skin. You see the neck is on the left, the legs have been cut off. It is not the earliest one because it already has a longitude and latitude scale at the bottom and the top. You can see those. And you see there is a lot of interior decoration, which is not actually usual for sea charts. But one thing that is usual and custom for sea charts is that the names, the toponyms, are all printed on the coastline perpendicular to the coastline to leave as much space for navigation as possible. This is a detail of the same thing. It's hard for you to recognize, but the toe of the boot of Italy is at the very upper right. Sicily is in the middle, and below you have Lampedusa, ill-famous nowadays because of all the fugitives trying to get into Europe, and the island of Pantelleria that played a role in World War II. Now, if we talk about sea charts, how many of them have we got? How many versions? How many derivatives? How many variants? I've made up a list that tells you we need maps for harbors and ports and roadsteads. We need maps to get in and out of rivers and sea inlets. We need maps for visual navigation along the coast. We need maps for the navigation on the high seas, where you see nothing than waves and water and clouds. And then there is a smaller number of planning charts that are used before you go out to sea, and the accident charts, that is the chart that comes out after you have wrecked your ships and you want other people to know how that happened. This is the first harbor plate, Valletta. It is from the Sea Atlas of Roux from the 1764 edition. And if you, I will try to press the correct buttons. I am not. Here we go. This is Valletta. You see here the anchors, they indicate safe anchorage. You see here the compass with an indication for magnetic or true north. You see numbers, that is depth soundings in fathoms, and you see the words brasse, which is French. Brasse is an arm, plural is 2 arms, and a fathom is 2 arms width from fingertip to fingertip, about 185, 180. Here we get in and out of rivers. On the left you see the map by Van Keulen of the Bordeaux entry, 1682. North, by the way, is at the bottom. You can see that from the crown here on the compass rose. And the part on the left here is actually, hold it. Here we are again. You see here this part that is tucked away behind this comical plant or whatever it is supposed to go on top, and it lengthens the access to the river. But the reason I wanted to show you this map is this part, which you see in detail on the right. You see that there is a sandbank where the currents stop, and when they weaken, they drop the sediment, the sand. And you see that the French have built a tower right on top of the sandbank. And you see a number of black lines, which are compass bearings, which you first have to figure out on the compass rose which bearing it would be. But if you come in, for instance, here from the south, north is at the bottom on this one, you can go in, maintaining the same bearing to this contraption on the sandbank, and then you make cross bearings on a windmill. If you have a high draft ship that is very deep, then you have to turn away from the sandbank early. If the draft is less, you can continue until you get the cross bearing of this tower, and it means that from here you would turn to starboard, and then you pick up this bearing line on another tower here, and that will guide you safely between the sandbanks into the river inland, and before the coast you can turn to starboard again to Bordeaux, or the other way around. You can get out this way or this way. I have the same story for the Marsdiep in the Netherlands. North is on the right in this case, and you see here there is a big sandbank out of the inlet in the sea, and we call it a dwaalder. A dwaalder is an errant sea bank, which means a sea bank that changes position slowly maybe, but importantly enough to account for it in navigation. I have the detail here because the tidal flow from ebb to flood and back will scourge the inlet here and keep it deep, but when the tide is changing from ebb to flood or vice versa, the current goes to zero. Here you have the detail. You see that we have already buoys. They are color-coded. If the wind is from the west-southwest, you would have to go out to the north. If the wind is from the northwest-north, you have to go out to the south. You go on the way out from beacon to beacon to beacon to beacon. The last one is actually white. It is shown red here, but it's wrong. And that will mean that here you are safe of the sandbank and you're free to turn to go out to sea or incoming the other way around. You can also see that here there is a line, there is a contraption, a wooden tower on the dunes, and here is the tower of the village of Den Hoorn. Once you can visually line up these three things, also important when this buoy with bad weather might have disappeared, you do that visually and you know where to turn left or right, port or starboard. This is for the coastal navigation. It's a well-known map, I think, from the Wagenaar people. You see, we have a compass rose, we have compass lines, we have an indication of true north. We have here the Aveiro River, we have some soundings in there. We have quite a bit of detail on the coast, but the important thing is what you see here. It's the coastal profile. The way the coast will look, it says de gedaante en opdoeningen van het land van Portugal als u 3 mijlen van u is en daar benevens zeilt. Or this is the way the coast will show up if you are 3 miles out to sea and you sail along the coast. That helps you in your visual navigation, of course. 10 years later, the former one was 1584. This is also Wagenaar, the Trésor der Zeevaart. And you see here the shape, the model has changed. It is more longitudinal. You have 2 compass roses. You have the same kind of information on the coast. You have the same fathoms of soundings of water depths, but the disappearance of the coastal profile is clear. The coastal profile has now been removed as a wood print back into the text, so it is still there, but it's in the explaining text, no longer is on this map. This one I'll skip, that was the Thames to London. Here you see Ireland and London, of course, with north on the right. But I show you this map because I want you to see how a sea chart is compiled. You have in the middle the primary compass rose. Around it, you have 8, 16, or 32, in this case 16, secondary compass roses. They're all interconnected with compass lines, officially loxodromes, but compass lines, they refer to directions on the compass. This basic system you will find on most of the navigating maps for the high seas. Now consider yourself on the high sea. This is the Pacific Ocean. On the right is South America. On the left are the Solomon Islands, close to New Guinea. And this is the Pacific map from Robert Dudley. Robert Dudley was the bastard son of the Earl of Dudley. He had to leave the country because he couldn't pay his bills. He went to Florence in Italy and he brought out the Arcano del Mare, a very famous early sea atlas. You see it is very full of indication. You see it is also very elegant. This stuff and this stuff is done by Lucchini. I have once tried to start at the end and come back to the beginning. I never managed. I'll show you a detail of this map also. Here you see that it is the Mare del Sur sea chart. You see here that it says that the corrente è per ponente. The current goes west. Here it tells you the venti fissi sono quasi sempre levanti o grecali. That means that the prevailing winds are normally from the east or the northeast. It also tells you that the air is healthy, contrary to malaria, where you get sickness, not so much from the bad air as from the mosquitoes, but I didn't know that at the time. You also see information here on the compass variation. Here is the variazione, is 1 3/4 degrees maestrale, which is northwesterly. Here it is 2 degrees. This kind of information is important to people out at sea. Another one by Van Keulen. You see here the same basic system of a primary compass rose and 16 secondary roses around it. It's a Mercator chart, so the scale of the map would depend on the latitude, but there is no scale bar. But the miles, 15 German miles to a degree of latitude, are added up along this meridian, so you have a scale bar as long as you measure the distance at the same place where you supposedly are. The reason I showed this one is also because of these 2 islands, and I have a detail of it. Here we are. On the left you see those added miles, but the reason I show you this is St. Helena and St. Helena Nova. They are exactly at the same latitude, and they're 7.5 degrees apart in longitude. And that is explained because in those days, the early days before 1800, it was impossible to determine your longitude at sea. So imagine how that works. You go out, you see an island. You plot it in your map somewhere close to the position you think you have yourself. You go home, you tell the boss tells the cartographer tells the people who design maps. They check with other information, and in the end they will put St. Helena on the map. Then somebody else comes, and they come with another island. They say, it's not St. Helena, it's another one. It's St. Helena Nova. There it is. But imagine how that goes. same story. You go home, you tell about it, but nobody knows where it is exactly. So the cartographer may ask the next crew going south, could you please check up? They do check up, but they don't know the latitude. So they either don't find anything at all and say, rubbish, there is no island, a phantom island at the most. Or they say, well, there was an island, but it's much more east or west. Or they say there is even 3 islands, whatever. But that's what you get, St. Helena and St. Helena Nova. Nova stayed on the map for about 100 years until it disappeared. Here we have the West Indian postcard with an inset here of southern tip, Strait Magellan, because it doesn't fit on the paper anymore. But basically this is a triangle trade. Triangle trade is bringing slaves from Angola to the Caribbean and North South America, go north to Manhattan and go home on the westerly winds to England and Holland. You see here also the wagon trail. I will come to that later. That is the suggested position to cross the equator. But again, it's hard to find. It's hard to find the latitude, the longitude, and of course, you are depending on the winds. The islands are here also. Let's go. No, I will take this one. This wagon trail is where you're supposed to cross the equator. But if there is no wind, there is no motive power for a sailing ship, so you stay there. Nothing you can do about it. The only thing is you're subject to currents. Now I'll quickly explain it. This is the hottest part on Earth, so the air here is heated up, it is rising. So you don't get a vacuum, you get wind supply from the north and the south. Those both supplies, they meet each other somewhere here, and there is no wind left, only air going up. So the ship has no motive power, so it has to wait until the wind picks up again. The thing is, there is also sea currents. And it happens that here is a current going into the Caribbean, and here is a current to go under the West African coast. If it takes you 3 weeks to wait for the wind to pick up, it'll be about 1,000 miles of trek. That will be another 3 weeks of sailing, probably more difficult sailing. If you end up here, you have to go back, all the way back here until you can go to the Cape of Good Hope. So it is very difficult, very important to find this wagon trail. The thing is also, of course, that if you have that current, and you would go with the current, and would go with this current, there is no hole in the water comes up from deep. They call it opwellend koud dieptewater in Dutch, or cold rising water from below. And that means if you're here, you're not subject to most of the currents, so you stay there. So when the wind picks up, you can continue your trek. This is a talk about a phantom island. It is made by Coronelli. It is 1/4 of a map. As a matter of fact, it's Greenland and the island of Friesland on the right. Frobisher Strait is not going through Greenland. It's right now it's here. But anyway, Friesland looks like a very good island with villages, church towers, and a lot. And there is a comment here. It's made by Coronelli. Coronelli was a Jesuit father, so he cannot be caught lying. So he tells us in the cartouche that this is the island of Friesland, which has been discovered by Niccolo Zeno, citizen of Venice. But he says the island is creduta favolosa or nel mare sommersa. He thinks it may be a phantom island and not exist, or it could have disappeared into the sea. Now, recapitulating on what we've heard so far, what do we need for sea charts? An indication of our anchorage, beacons and buoys to get in and out, bearings to landmarks, a coastal profile, a compass variation information, compass roses, currents, depth soundings, hazard warnings. We still have as a matter of fact, warnings that say abrolhos, keep your eyes open in Portuguese or Spanish, or vigia, watch out. And the interior names, as I pointed out before, printed perpendicular to the coastline. Here we have a planning chart by Herman Moll. Moll came in from Emden, at the time Dutch or German, whatever way you want to look at it. He went to London, worked for somebody else, then started his own business. And here you have a Mercator chart of the world. You have an indication of the prevailing winds and currents. You have a lot of notes, and he says here, the whole world's on it. The only thing is, on the Mercator chart, you cannot present the whole world, at least not on a normal translator, because above 70 or 80 degrees north, you have to get another projection, because it would be much too large. It would be infinity at the poles, as a matter of fact. So this is the addition up north. This is the isogons, the compass information. This is a planning chart if you want to go someplace. You see Australia 1719. The Dutch have been at the west coast, and Captain Cook has not yet been at the east coast. This is kind of the same thing. You see here Australia. You see it on the other end. So the map is suitable for planning Pacific and Atlantic and Indian Ocean trips. The reason I show it is because you have here a red line, sea track, and a yellow one. The yellow one is you either come, the yellow one, you come out of the channel from Holland, or you come north around Scotland, depending on the wind when you left Holland. You go here is that wagon trail, where the wind dies down on you and the current is dangerous. You go along the coast of Brazil, and slowly you turn east, picking up the westerly winds to Cape Town, and then you continue. There we are again. Then you continue due easterly on the Brouwer route since 1613, and here are two islands, not uninhabited, so you're easily missing them at night because there is no light, no fire, no nothing. And even in a rain shower you may not notice. From here you can turn north to India and to Ceylon. You can also go on, like the Dutch East India Company did, to Sunda Straits for Batavia, Jakarta. The thing is here the track splits, and that is because if there is a southeasterly monsoon, it would be good to end up under Java. The Java coast is running east-west, and then you have to go port with the winds behind you to Sunda Straits. You don't have to tack with that big ship and the tired crew climbing the masts and the sails. The other half year, you should, there's the yellow line, to end up under Sumatra. The coastline is easily identified because it is running north-west, southeast. And again there, if you end up under Sumatra, you know that you have to go to starboard, and again you have the wind from behind, so you save yourself a lot of work. The same story, by the way, here for the north. This is a planning chart. Then is this a sea chart? This actually is a Blau chart. I never wanted to buy it because I thought that the bear was so ugly, but that is not the point. Here you have again the primary compass rose at the North Pole. You have 2 times 4 makes 8 around it. This is actually an instruction chart. It is not used on board, but it will prove, for instance, if you would go from a position out here to a position out there, the great circle would be the straight line. There is ice in between and probably land also, but just for the theory of it, this would be the shortest way to get there. But if you would go according to the compass lines, you would go easterly, 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 also end up. But here you can see that it is very important that you know where the great circle is, so you can relate your great circle to the detour that you would have following the Loxodrome. Is this then a sea chart? You see here Valletta, we talked about it. You see a compass rose, you see compass lines, but there is not all the rest. This is a map of Sicily, of Malta, of Gozo, of Tunis, or whatever we have here. We have the islands here. This is not a sea chart. It's a nice French chart by De Fer and Danet for Malta and Gozo. Is this then a sea chart? This is a copper plate. This is going to become a sea chart. It is a sea chart. It's about 1.10 meters, 1.20 meters in width. It's about 30 kilos in weight. It is a German copper plate. It was made in 1922. It has been updated until 1940 by the Germans, and until 1941 the Germans had invaded Holland, so they had access to the Dutch maps, and they were invading their Batavia, Jakarta, where the Dutch were specialists, of course. They improved their maps in 1941. One of the potential reasons for doing that is that the Japanese had in the meantime invaded the Dutch East Indies, Indonesia, and the Germans and the Japanese were friends, and the Germans needed a submarine base in Java, Surabaya or Jakarta, so they wouldn't have to go back to Germany all the time for new ammunition, torpedoes and foodstuffs, but could update their catering and ammunition in Jakarta. Now this is one of my last, I think the very last. Is this a sea chart? Well, Holland is Holland, and Holland is not sea, although it's below sea lots of times. Here you see a bird's eye view of Amsterdam. It's not a sea chart. Here you see a plan chart of Rotterdam, a bird's eye view of Middelburg, I think, a bird's eye view of Utrecht. This is a historical map, also a type of map. This is the gardens of the palace at Loo, near Apeldoorn. These maps I used to use for talks when I had to explain how many different types of charts there are. We have, you can probably read here, this is a new, and whatever it says, map of the United Provinces of the Netherlands. It is a map, it's not a chart. We haven't touched on this one. Here it is. We have the compass rose, we have north, we have compass lunge, we have routings, we have soundings, we have anchorage, we have getting into the Thames, there are buoys and things like that. This indeed is a sea chart. It's very easy once you know it, because it says here a chart of part of the coasts and sands and banks of England and Holland. Is a chart, it's not a map. This is a chart, yes, this is a sea chart, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attention. Enjoy the map fair.